So how did mind wandering get this recent supercharged upgrade? So I often talk about this study. A wandering mind is an unhappy mind. And it's so important because it looks at all these different activities and how we spend half of our waking day mind wandering, which is to say not in reality, but in this mental simulation. In fact, there's only one activity in which humans predictably did not mind wander. But this means that we're spending half of our waking time not in mindfulness, but in the mental simulation. And we could ask, well, why do we mind wander in the first place? Where did it come from? When did we start doing it? And we could speculate that at some point in human evolution, we were able to leave reality by creating mental simulations of reality, but then being able to manipulate them. And this goes back to this idea that at some point our ancestors were able to look at a rock and not just see a rock, not just image a rock, but transform that image into something it isn't, a weapon. And that could explain how this whole thing started. It solved the problem. But how does mind wandering, what does it do for us in modern times? Well, don't trust anything I say. Look at your own mind wandering. So for how many hours a day as your mind wanders, is it solving problems? What's it doing? How is it functioning? The suggestion I have, and again, see if your own experiences are in line with this, does mind wandering satisfy the ego? Are these fantasies of winning, fantasies of living a better life? Because reality is so dissatisfying. And that's what the ego is. The ego is just unhappy with reality. It's always been unhappy with reality. And we have something to thank for this. You know, when we look at indoor plumbing or any technological innovation, it came because the mind was unhappy with reality, so it formed a simulation and then altered the simulation, solving some problem and making life, quote, easier. And so how does this relate to the supercharged upgrade? Well, I remember getting a cell phone. When I first got a cell phone, my wife was pregnant, and the whole purpose was so I could have easy communication when the time had come about. And that's exactly what I got the cell phone for. Now, how many hours a day do we spend on our cell phones? Well, observe what happens when you are perusing through your cell phone, through the many hours a day in which you will do so. And ask this basic question: is this satisfying the ego? Because my suggestion is it is doing nothing but satisfying the ego. You get to scroll through and your side, if it's politics, your side wins. This person gets schooled. Or you get to see vicariously, you live through other people's lives who are famous, or you get to imagine buying this or buying that. It's like a giant buffet where the ego gets to go through and pick and choose. But here's the tricky part, because we know that there are algorithms, and what these algorithms do is it watches what you pick and choose, and then it gives you more of what you've chosen, which is to say the ego is going to get a diet made specifically for what it finds pleasurable. Now, I don't get any sponsorship from Ground News. I just want to mention it because if you go to Ground News, they have what's called a blind spot feature. And it's really cool because if you click on it, you'll see which news the left is getting and which news the right is getting. And the interesting thing, of course, is that it's completely different news. And so when we think of turning on the news, we think, well, I'm going to turn on and see what's new. But you're not getting what's new. You're getting what is feeding your ego. And so this is all ego food. And so that's how we've supercharged mind wandering, because the trick is when you're looking at your phone, you're not actually conjuring up the images in the mind anymore. You get to skip the step of the mental simulation and go right to a simulation in reality. That is, you can see on the phone, you can hear what's happening on the phone. And so you bypass the mental simulation and go right to something that has 1 foot in reality. And so we often say, well, people are addicted to their phones, and they're not. They're addicted to the supercharged version of mind wandering.